Hello, and welcome to Trans Truth, the podcast dedicated to dispelling myths, fear, and ignorance about transgender people. Along the way, we'll be sharing items of interest to the transgender community, from political and news events to health, fashion, and beauty. And now, let's have a look at some news items that should be of interest to our listeners. Well, hello and welcome to Trans Truth. I am Kelly Nelson. You can call me Aunt Kelly. I am a cybersecurity professional in real life, a voice actor, a retired adrenaline junkie, and of course a transgender activist. And I am joined by...
Well, I'm Jeri Ann. I'm a former educator and former associate pastor. I've done postgraduate work in education and biblical studies, and I am a reluctant transgender activist.
Okay, why a reluctant transgender activist?
Well, when I transitioned, all I desired was peace. Peace from the inner turmoil that I felt being transgendered and having to survive in an unaccepting culture. And when I transitioned, all I wanted was my little square footage on planet Earth where I could live in peace and live as my authentic self. But once I did that, I discovered that there was so much need, that there was so much to be done to help other transgender people. But let me ask you a question. Why a retired adrenaline junkie? What is an adrenaline junkie anyway?
Well, an adrenaline junkie is someone who gets their kicks by scaring themselves. In my younger years, I was into motorsports. I raced motorcycles. I raced outboard hydroplanes. I raced karts. I was a freestyle skier, rock climber. Even tried to ride a bull once. I did not make it to 8 seconds and didn't break any bones on that one. But, as the years wore on, I decided, I think I'm gonna hang up all the thrill sports and pursue other things. So yeah, I'm retired. I'm a adrenaline junkie on pension now.
So you faced death, you dared the devil, and survived to produce this podcast. So why are we here?
Yes, I did survive. And we are here to, well, let me back up a little bit. How we got here. Jeri and I are real good friends. We talk on the phone almost every day, and we solve the world's problems every day on the phone. And eventually it got to the point where I thought, we should share this because we're so smart. We've solved all these problems. How about we put together a podcast? And Jeri Ann answered quickly in the affirmative, basically called my bluff. So here we are, and we are here to provide truth, to provide accurate information in order to promote informed social discourse about transgender issues. There is so much misinformation out there. And more than that, there's a vacuum of information. There aren't that many trans people. Odds are, unless there's one in your family or you are trans, you've not run across one and known about it. So we want to address that.
Absolutely. And let me just reiterate that we are here to provide truth about the transgender condition, and hence the name Trans Truth. We're also here to supply and provide needed support for transgender individuals so they can overcome the obstacles to their self-acceptance and their fulfillment. There's such a need out there, especially when a person is born transgender and living in an unaccepted culture. There's so much misinformation out there that we want to help them, and not only them, but their friends, families, and allies. Is that right? Kelly?
Absolutely. Jerry, backing it up a little bit again, Jeri Ann and I met in an online community for transgender people. Since then, we've become active in a few more. But the thing that we see constantly are questions and pain and fear, all because there's a lack of information. People are, well, let me back up even more, as in years ago, before the internet, we were isolated. There were support groups if you lived in a larger area, but very little else in the way of support. So it's gotten better, but we still see that need through our interactions in these online forums to spread more information. And it is our hope that this podcast will reach more people who need that information.
Absolutely. And you know what's most needed is accurate information. Kelly, you mentioned our meeting. I had forgotten that we met on an online forum that so many years ago. It seems like we've always known each other. And our first meeting was at a social activity.
Yeah, that's right, at GNO.
That I hosted, absolutely, and so
that's girls' night out.
You're right. We call that Girls' Night Out, and that's what we're talking about in terms of support for transgender individuals. The Houston Girls' Night Out was just a social activity, and I had arranged a safe place and a safe environment for trans women to come out and express themselves authentically. And that's how Kelly and I first met. It was pretty cool. And I thank you for reminding me of that. I had forgotten about that.
And well, in the days before COVID, it was getting pretty successful. And I define success by providing that service, that place for transgender people of all stripes who aren't yet comfortable going out, usually alone, to be with friends, to be with peers. And it did get successful. We had some regular members. We took it on the road once in a while. We've done a couple of them up in Austin, and we have had people travel from across the United States to join us. That to me still speaks to a need for support in the community.
Absolutely. But another purpose of our podcast is to help the friends and families of transgender people understand that transgender people can't help it. They were born that way. It's not a lifestyle choice. It's not a perversion. And so many of our transgender friends have families and friends like that they have to keep their being transgender a secret from them. So the purpose of this podcast is to provide trans truth so that people know better, just plain and simple, so that they know better. Our that lack of knowledge that results in fear and discrimination and sometimes harm is reflected in our political atmosphere too.
Yeah. I'd like to recap something you said a moment ago when we're talking about the lack of knowledge, that being transgender is not a choice. It's a medical condition. We were born this way. There's treatment for this condition, but it's not a lifestyle choice. You either deal with it in a positive way or you suffer for your entire life, not being able to live who you are.
Oh, absolutely. It's a medical condition with no cure. There are treatments, but not a cure.
And I guess the other thing that we're here for is to promote action. We see a huge need for political action, social action. We want to be able to suggest ways that you can affect change as an engaged and supportive member of the community. And we'll talk a lot about that in upcoming episodes. As you might guess, in current politics, the transgender community is a target. So we'll suggest ways that we can deal with that. Well, we've thrown that term around a lot, transgender. Let's talk about what we mean by transgender?
Well, Kelly, transgender is an umbrella term that we use now. And for many years, well, let me back up a little bit. I thought I was the only one. For much of my life, I thought I was the only weirdo on the planet. There was no internet. You didn't see anything but perhaps Milton Berle in a dress with lipstick, and that wasn't me.
Don't forget Flip Wilson.
Flip Wilson later. But in the 1960s, when I first went to university, as soon as I got my ID card, I went to the university library and I pulled out that card catalog drawer with the second half of the T's in the alphabet. And sure enough, there was a transgender card, a subject card, but there was not a book card. And for years, I'd go and pull out that same drawer. And then one day, there was a book about transsexuals. And that was the first information I was ever exposed to. And that was probably in the early 1970s.
That's that late. I thought you had that steam-powered internet back when you were in school.
Oh my gosh, you're going to pay for that. You just think you faced danger in your past. But but nowadays, and don't even ask me how I knew that word, transsexual. But nowadays we just refer to it as an umbrella term of as transgender. And it simply refers to anyone who expresses as, in part or full, a gender other than they were assigned at birth.
Let me jump in, Jeri Ann. You started you threw out the first of our subcategories of transgender, and that is transsexual. Expand on that.
Well, certainly, Kelly. I was identified male at birth, but identified as female since my earliest recollection. In fact, one of those earliest recollections was actually praying to be a girl, not realizing at that young age that I really was a girl. In fact, I didn't realize that until much later when I understood what I was and came to grips with it. But actually, a transsexual is a transgender person who identifies as the gender opposite that they were identified at birth. And of course, the prefix trans means across, so across sex. A transsexual is someone who transitions from the gender role of the sex that they were identified at birth into the other gender role. In my case, identified male at birth, transitioned into a gender role of female, and now live full time as female.
So it's an either or. You're either a man or a woman.
Well, in my case, more or less, yes. Now, there is no black and white exclusively. Mix them together, and you got gray, and you can refer to the gray area perhaps as non-binary. There is.
You finally picked up on my segue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the next subcategory that we're going to throw out as one of the terms we'll use regularly is non-binary, and these are people who were assigned either gender at birth, and who aren't comfortable with that. They are not binary. They aren't necessarily the gender they were born with. And they are not necessarily a transsexual. They aren't comfortable being one or the other. They are non-binary. And I guess under that definition, we could also include the gender fluid people. They go back and forth. Jeri Ann and I have some friends that are gender fluid. Some days they feel like expressing in a masculine way, and sometimes they feel like expressing in a feminine way.
Oh, absolutely. I have a young friend who was identified female at birth, and we used to go to church together. And one Sunday she'd wear a dress, be cute as a bug, and next Sunday she'd wear slacks and a sports shirt. and no makeup, and she was comfortable that way because that's just how she felt that day. So she's gender fluid, and she'd date girls, she'd date boys, and she did whatever would float her boat.
And now we come to the cross-dressers. Certainly greater in number than any of these other subcategories we've talked about, but the cross-dressers also fall under the transgender umbrella term. And these are people that for any number of reasons literally enjoy dressing in or appearing as a member of the opposite sex. It may just be an occasional kind of in the closet activity, or they may enjoy going out and completely expressing as a female, but inside they'll tell you, no, I'm still a man, or I'm still a woman. I just enjoy dressing in those as the opposite sex from time to time. And I suppose we should talk about drag queens. They're not really what we would call under the transgender umbrella term, though they do dress as women. They are performers, and everybody has seen RuPaul's Drag Race. That's one form of drag queen performance. There are others, but the main thing to take away is that it's a performance for them.
Absolutely, I'm glad you mentioned that. When you wear a costume and you perform, that's different than just needing to live a certain way. Yeah. That's performing for an income.
Right. So we've thrown out a whole bunch of labels, and now I'm going to tell you that the experts, the professional community, the medical and psychological community, tends to avoid labels. They have latched on to transgender as an umbrella term to cover all manner of gender identity and gender expression, but they approach actual diagnosis of being transgender in a different way. The standard for that is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, currently on version 5. And if there were an equal sign between transsexual and the diagnosis in the DSM-5, it would be gender dysphoria. It would be, well, I'm going to let Jeri Ann talk about gender dysphoria. She expresses it better than I do.
Oh, absolutely. The gender dysphoria is the best I can describe it is a feeling of angst that you feel like a girl, but you're compelled to live as a guy, and that is extremely stressful for a transsexual person, even if you were identified as female at birth, but you identified as male. Being forced by your culture to live in a way that is contrary to the way you feel results in a measure of angst is the word I prefer to use for that. And but technically it's described as gender dysphoria, and it is a horrible condition, and only relieved by treatments, medical treatments, and the opportunity to live authentically. Gender dysphoria can be so severe that a person can just ultimately cop out of life, and that's one reason that the
literally yeah.
Cop out of life, yeah. And the transgender population has a horrendous suicide rate as a result of that, and I think we'll get into that a little later. But that's my expression of gender dysphoria. You have anything to add, Kelly?
I think that covers it. We've talked about all these definitions, and no matter where you fall in that category, we hope to address the preponderance of transgender people who attempt to suppress and hide their true selves. Lots of reasons to do that, some valid, some not. We want to fix all those where we can. Meanwhile, you just get through each day by sheer will, fake it till you make it.
Yes, and sometimes there's just so much that you can fake. I know a trans woman who expresses it as or likens it to wringing out towel. She said, I wrung out that towel and got all the guy that I could out of that towel. And when no more guy could be wrung out of that towel, she said, I just had to drop the towel. And that's a great visual.
I love that metaphor. It makes sense. And you just have to have been there to get it, but it's so right. So let's tell people what they can expect from future episodes of Trans Truth.
All right. Well, in the future, we plan on having discussions on religion, politics, medical treatments, the transition.
And by that, we mean the whole process, not just the medical treatments and surgeries and stuff like that. We're talking about
social transition, professional transition, transition in every way. Let's see.
We're going to cover news and topical items of interest like we did at the top of the show. I should say news and topical items of interest to the transgender community like we did at the top of the show. We will have guests from time to time. I'm sorry, did you have something you wanted to add there, Jeri Ann?
I did. We're in our news items and of interest to the transgender community. And to everyone else too, even allies, friends, and families. It's important to recognize that there are a lot of transgender people who are very successful in all walks of life: medicine, politics, engineering, especially information technology. Most of your information, your cyber information, is probably handled by a transgender person. It's been my experience.
We know a lot of people that are transgender people that are that work in information technology. I'm not sure why that is, but it's just been a field that's been more accepting to diversity.
It seems that way. Sometimes I wonder, what am I doing here?
You mentioned successful transgender people. So we're not all like Elliot Page or, who's that? Used to be a Olympic decathlete. What's her name?
Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, that one.
Caitlyn Jenner,
Yeah, we're not her at all.
No. No, we're real people, Kelly. We're just real people. We have talents, we have knowledge, we have skills. We have a need for acceptance. We have a need for love, fulfillment. We're just regular people. That's all. And we're going to, in the future...
most of us are. You're a movie star.
Oh my gosh! I guess we'll get into that. We'll get into that later in a future episode, I guess.
Well, let's talk a little bit about it now. We're going to have guests on the show. We're going to have personal accounts and testimonies from transgender people.
So I'm going to be my own guest?
I guess so. I'll explain it's just a tease for an upcoming episode with one of our guests. Jeri Ann was part of a very moving documentary about one of our friends who's a transgender attorney who also lives here in the Houston area. So stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, I'm hoping we also get the Honorable Judge Phyllis Fry on board. Phyllis Fry is also a resident here in Houston, and she is the first ever transgender judge on planet Earth. She was appointed as a city judge quite some years ago now.
Yeah.
I think there are 3, maybe 4 judges around the country, around the world. But we hope to get Phyllis Fry on board. Yeah. In addition to some other guests in the areas of religion, politics, law, social sciences, What else, Kelly?
Let's see. Well, I wanted to back up and talk about Phyllis. I don't want to spill all the beans, but Judge Fry has some historical legal accomplishments on her resume. If you want to find out more about her, just Google Judge Phyllis Fry, and you'll come across some amazing articles about her. We also hope to get experts with information of importance to transgender people. And like Jeri Ann said, the topics will cover everything from religion to politics to law, social science, medical science, health and beauty, you name it. Well, Jeri Ann, I think that about wraps up our first Trans Truth podcast. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I mean, sincerely, thank you for joining us because, we're doing this thing, but it's you that's going to take this information out to your friends, family, coworkers, and whatever. So keep an eye on this space. Our next episode will drop soon, and the topic on that episode is
transphobia. The irrational fear of, aversion to, or discrimination against transgender people.
You have been listening to Trans Truth, the podcast that is speaking truth about what it means to be transgender. We hope that you have found this episode to be informative and enlightening, whether you are transgender yourself, you have a friend or loved one who is transgender, and especially if you're simply looking to understand more about the transgender experience. Thanks for listening.